Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Sex Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am, of course, your host, Becky, and today I thought I would be talking a little bit about porn. Now, I think we can all agree everybody watches porn. I mean, I think most people don't want to admit it, but it's just kind of become a natural part of having a healthy sexual life. So I thought we would kind of deep dive into porn and, really talk about porn as a tool to be used for both, pleasuring yourself as well as maybe getting yourself ready with a partner. I think there's a common misconception that porn is something that you do privately, and it doesn't have to be the case. Porn can be something that, of course, you do privately, you do by yourself. But it can also be kind of something fun to introduce with your partner, that will both help you understand each other, by, picking a video that speaks out to you both, or picking an audio file that, kind of turns you both on, and, kind of going from there. It gives you a certain kind of insight into what your partner's looking for. And that could be an interesting discussion that the two of you have, or, it could be something that, you realize is something that is a turn on for both of you rather than just one or the other. So it's, again, learning more about your partner and, again, opening that dialogue between the two of you. So let's have a discussion about porn or the adult video industry. And let's also address the fact that, unfortunately, porn has become kind of a go-to for sex ed. And this is kind of detrimental in terms of, how young people are perceiving sex or how sex should be, quote unquote. I think, first of all, dispelling this idea that, porn is a way to educate yourself about sex, is important. As I've said on here, a couple times before, I think that sex education, specifically in America, is extremely underdeveloped, and it isn't being used to its, best potential in terms that, I feel as though our country is still, stigmatizing sex in a way that, kind of makes it impossible for young people to have a discussion with adults about, what is sex? What is it that I need to know about sex? To one, be healthy, and two, just to understand, what the concept of sex is. What is it other than the physical act or the anatomy of my body that I should know? And those are things like creating intimacy and communication with one another. And so in taking this idea that porn is being used as an educational tool, makes me a little sad, because one, not all porn mirrors what life is, and how everyday people enjoy sex. And two, so a lot of it's fake. I mean, there are very seldom videos that portray, especially with women, portray women having, orgasms or climaxing in a realistic way. So for example, if you have a young person who's only using porn as an example of, oh, well, that's what sex should be. And then they go into a sexual encounter with somebody, their perception of how it should go every single time is a little skewed, right? I mean, you can't just go into it thinking, oh, well, I saw it in that one video, so I'm going to do that with this partner, and it's going to work out. Well, it's not usually the case, right? I mean, absolutely, sometimes that is the case. And some people are into, certain kinds of play, certain kinds of foreplay, all of those things. But there's also a lot of gray area when it comes to sex on a whole. And everybody differs in what their sexual appetites are. So going into your sexual life and only having the standard that, porn has set for you, can be kind of detrimental. Especially in the sense that a lot of porn that you find on the internet is hard, it's rough, and not everybody is into that. Sometimes, especially when you're first starting out, you want to take it a little slower. You want to give yourself the benefit of things are going to go wrong. People may laugh. There will be talking. It's much like mainstream media or Sex in the media. It's not going to go all perfect or the way that you envisioned it every single time. I think when talking to people about porn, I think porn should be used as, or at least in my experience, porn is a tool that you use. It's a tool in your kit of sexual lifestyle, sexual health. Porn is something that you can use in your kit to help boost sexual arousal, and boost experimentation with your partner, or the ideas that you can have in the bedroom. But one, both people have to be consenting of this, right? And two, you have to take into consideration the factors of, well, what does my partner want? What do I want? And, figuring out what those things are together. And then additionally, we also, I think, in the discussion of adult film and porn and erotica, I think there's also a discussion of, well, what porn is okay porn? And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about in terms of, you may like videos online of sexual acts that demoralize your partner or, force sex onto somebody. And, in reality, a lot of those things may not be okay, depending on your partner and depending on the conversation that you have with them about what you both want, right? So if in your private time there are things that you see online and you're thinking to yourself, wow, that makes me, really aroused, that makes me excited, but I would never want to do that to another person, or I don't think I would want to ever have this kind of scene play out necessarily in my bedroom or in my home. That's okay. I mean, I think we have to differentiate the fact that, again, porn is a tool for arousal, and we have to separate the fantasy from the reality, right? And this goes back to the idea of dispelling the thought that porn should be your only standard of education when it comes to sex, right? So maybe we have a discussion of what is the reality of the things that I want versus what is the fantasy of the things that make me excited, and where do we find the middle ground between those things? And on that note, I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to be talking about maybe something you do in private or maybe something you do with a partner. That's masturbation. Stay tuned.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
back to the GSMC Sex Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I, of course, am again your host, Becky. And in our first segment, we talked a little bit about pornography and the adult film industry, and how we as consumers of this industry should, one, I think, in addition to everything that I said, in addition, I think we need to hold porn to a higher standard as well. We have this idea of fantasy versus reality. I think we all understand that, you know, this industry is being used as a platform of sexual education, which I don't think it even realizes. And if that's the case, do we need to be holding porn to a different standard of, you know, showing younger people, you know, sometimes we have sex like this, sometimes we have sex like this. And, you know, do we hold this industry to a standard that, you know, forces them to comply with sexual health, understanding different sexualities? Or do we simply not think about it in that way? And again, only use it as a tool of fantasy for our sexual enjoyment or our sexual arousal, without taking into consideration other factors. And in this segment, I wanted to talk a little bit about masturbation or pleasuring yourself, if you will. I mean, again, there's a stigma in this country of, you know, not being sexual. And, you know, if you're a religious person, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not masturbating should be, you know, something that we do. And, you know, much like sex, what we have to realize is that, one, people are going to do it regardless of anything. And even if it's just out of curiosity of just, this kind of feels good, maybe I should explore that. And two, we have to realize that, like sex, masturbating is a stress reliever. It helps with blood circulation. It, you know, gives you endorphins like a workout. And it shouldn't be something that we are ashamed of per se. And in this discussion, I personally think that it's really important to stress to women specifically, it's okay to masturbate. I have so many friends who refuse to do it because they think, oh, well, I'm going to find a partner who will do that for me. I don't want to do that myself. Why? I mean, sometimes you need some me time, right? And sometimes sex can be part of that. And by including pleasuring yourself, one, you get to understand what your body wants. And, you know, just like in my episode on BDSM, understanding what your body wants and what your body needs is so important if you are, you know, having sex with a partner, because then you can tell them what you like. And for women, there's this idea that we aren't sexual creatures. And I say we because, of course, I am a woman. But I think there's this idea that women are supposed to be, you know, sexual creatures other than in their looks. And one, that's just not true. Everybody can be a sexual creature. Everyone can be interested in sex. So first of all, let's just dispel that thought here and now, right? But I think with women in particular, there's almost a kind of shame that comes with, one, speaking your mind about what you want in the bedroom or with a partner. And two, there's a kind of shame of, you know, even just exploring it yourself, which is so sad. And it makes me especially sad. Like I said, that my friends don't necessarily feel that they can or they should pleasure themselves in that way. It kind of makes me wonder, you know, where does this idea come from that we shouldn't try and make ourselves feel good in one way or another? And it makes me curious in terms of, well, is it religion? Is it society? Is it, in America, is it the fact that we're founded on, you know, more puritanical values? What is it that kind of makes the idea of masturbating seem almost dirtier than sex? And why should we feel judged because we had a hard day and decided to rub one out, so to speak? And, why should we feel shame in that, right? I mean, what we do in the privacy of our own home as consenting adults shouldn't be something that we feel bad about afterwards. And of course, I would love to hear, your thoughts on this idea, because it's just something that isn't really talked about very often, right? Even in mainstream media, you don't see people having time to themselves. You usually see people with a partner. And having a partner is great. But, even I will admit that sometimes, even though having a partner is great, sometimes you just kind of want to do it yourself, right? And that shouldn't be anything to be ashamed of either. There's nothing wrong with taking care of business, So I'm going to take a quick break. And when I come back, we're going to be continuing our discussion about pleasuring yourself / masturbation. And also maybe talking about a couple tips or tricks that you can use in your one-on-one time. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I, of course, am your host, Becky, and we were talking a little bit about pleasuring yourself and masturbation and trying to dispel the thought that, this should be a dirty act or something that you shouldn't think about doing if you have a partner. And I had mentioned before my first break that, this can be something that you do on your own in private, or it can also be something that you and your partner do together. And this can be something interesting that you both try, right? I mean, I think it's something that people don't necessarily think of when they think of sex with a partner. I think, the stereotypical thought is that you have sex. But you can also, it's kind of an interesting exercise to try in terms of, visually letting your partner see what you like. And it's one other thing that you can do to kind of grow intimacy with each other. Because you're letting them into a world that maybe you don't share with other people, right? In my experience, it's something that we do privately, and it's something that only we know the rules of. So when you introduce it to a partner, it's an interesting level of intimacy that you get to share with them, because basically you're showing them the most vulnerable elements of you. And at the end of the day, maybe they learn something that you liked that they didn't know before, or maybe they understand something that you're doing and then can replicate it later on. It's almost like you're teaching them how to do it. And there can be something fun and sexual about even just that aspect of things. And with all that being said, here are some fun masturbation tricks that you can use. So I thought I would start with men. Now, I'm not a man, but I did a little bit of research about things that you can do to enhance your pleasure when having a little time to yourself. And some of the tips that I found seem a little obvious, but maybe, just maybe, it's something that you personally hadn't thought of before. So for all of my dudes out there, the first tip that I had found was to use your non-dominant hand. And what this does is maybe your non-dominant hand is, a different experience for you. It's using a tool that you hadn't used before, right? And even if it doesn't necessarily enhance anything, or if it doesn't work for you, it was something that you tried, and now you know, right? I think there's a tendency in people, I know that I fall victim to it, that we get into a rhythm of, how we do these things. And sometimes it can get stale. Sometimes it can get to the point where it stops working as effectively as you want it to. So try using your non-dominant hand. See what happens. The next tip that I found was trying to change your position. And like I said, I think we get into a rhythm. I think that most people more than likely are doing this while laying down in bed, possibly in the shower. But just try changing your position if you have the opportunity to. You might find that the difference in position enhances things. You may find it more exciting. If you are visualizing a fantasy of something, it may enhance things. Plus, you may find that by using other muscles and things, it becomes a more intense fantasy that you're having with yourself. And then the last tip that I found was to use both hands, actually, by interlocking your fingers and doing it that way, rather than just using one hand or your non-dominant hand, using them together in perfect harmony. And this will give you a more complete feeling, I guess you could say. But definitely things to try out. And now for the ladies. First of all, I think for ladies, again, push past the thought that you don't need to masturbate or you don't want to masturbate. Everybody does. Everybody wants to, feel good. And if this is something that you can do if you don't have a partner, or maybe your partner isn't interested in having sex at the moment, it's something that you can do to relieve stress or to, help yourself go to bed that night. So first of all, ladies, just try it, because you may end up really liking it. The second tip that I would say is touch your body. We have a lot of nerve endings in our bodies, and rather than just going straight for the kill, so to speak, touch your skin and, really feel the texture of your skin or the sensitive areas. And, you can make a mental note of those things to, again, tell your future partners about, that arouse you. This can also be a really kind of sensuous experience for yourself. Like I said, we have a lot of nerve endings in our bodies, and women are also blessed with multiple nerve endings in very concentrated places. So taking the time to kind of pay attention to those places can be very beneficial for you, to say the least. And then the last tip for my lady friends would be to invest in yourself. And by invest in yourself, I mean buy a vibrator, or buy a dildo, something that, and it doesn't have to be anything huge or big or something that you plug into, but find something that you think is cute, or, anything, something that speaks to you while you're in the store, or order it on Amazon. They have them there. But sometimes having an extra tool can help you get there, right? I mean, what I've experienced is that every woman is different in terms of how their body reacts to things. So maybe just using your hands is enough. Maybe it's not. Maybe you need that extra little help, which is something that a vibrator can do for you. You can invest in a lubricant. There's just so many things that you can do with your body that will make you feel good. And again, I don't think it's something that we should be ashamed of. because everybody does it. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, thank you for checking out the GSMC Sex Podcast hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Let us know how we're doing. Let me know how I'm doing. And also don't forget to check us out on social media. Our Facebook page is Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, and our Twitter handle is GSMC_sex. So I hope you like the content. Can't wait to hear what your thoughts are, and I will see you all next time. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.